Good evening, Tigard community. I am Chief Kathy McAlpine, your police chief for the Tigard Police Department, and thank you for joining me on Chat with the Chief. Sorry, we had a little bit of delay getting the technical difficulties, so I appreciate your patience. For those who may be tuning in for the first time, basically this is my opportunity to answer any questions that you have. And we do have some questions that have already come in. I usually just read them right off and try and answer your questions. Also, there's some updates that I'll share with you. A couple other things I want to say is it's been a little while since I've done a chat with the chief, but I want to thank the mayor, especially in light of the recent events of everything that has happened with the tragic death of George Floyd and all of the ensuing conversations about police reform. I've had an opportunity to join him on his Facebook Live and really answer questions that all of you have had. So I do want to thank the mayor for allowing me to share the stage with him to answer your questions. And now he's on a much needed vacation, enjoying his family, and we're going to go ahead and keep answering the questions. I would only assume that still the recent topics about police reform is the hot topic, and so I don't want to brush that aside, but I also want to encourage anybody else who has something else on their mind or have a question to please bring those forward as well. We appreciate that. So with that, Toby had asked and sent in ahead of time, does the Tigard Police enjoy qualified immunity? And if so, is there any discussion or research being done into ending or at least curbing this policy? Well, Toby, the first thing I got to say is I saw enjoy, and I kind of just cringed at that because I can tell you nobody loves to be sued. So I don't know that anybody enjoys it, whether they get qualified immunity or not. Any public government employee gets qualified immunity. So it's not just for the police, it's elected officials, judges, anybody that works with the government gets qualified immunity. And then if through the case facts or whatnot, if they find that they knew and worked outside of a policy or a law, they could have that taken away from them. So it's nothing I grant. This is something that is afforded to everybody, every government employee, and it can be litigated. And so our insurance carriers would actually litigate if an officer did something outside of our policies. They might appeal to the courts to say we should not grant the officer qualified immunity. If they acted in good faith, obviously the insurance carrier would say that they wouldn't argue against it. So that is what it is. Qualified immunity is basically so that the employee is not being sued. It's not coming out of their personal pockets, because you can imagine as a public employee, there's a lot of things we do when we interact with the community. And at any time, anybody can bring a lawsuit. And so through the course of time, the courts have established what is known as qualified immunity. And right now, the Supreme Court is the one that really weighs on it. They established the current criteria. And as recent as last week, I've heard that they have said that they are not going to review it as it is. That doesn't mean they haven't opened the door for future, but right now they say they're just not automatically going to review it. As far as is there discussion, of course, that is a hotly contested, conversation, especially when it comes to police officers' misconduct. But again, qualified immunity is a broader one under the context of all public employees. And research, yes, I've actually looked myself, and there is research that the concerns that we have, such as would anybody even want to be a police officer if they didn't at least get some sort of protection? There's research that evidence that and so I think it's going to be discussed a lot in the upcoming future. So stand by, and we'll keep updated as I learn as well. I will also say, if you tune into the council meeting on July 14th, the insurance carrier for the city of Tigard is going to be talking about qualified immunity to the council, and you may be able to tune in and get some information that way too. Toby also had a follow-up question. What policy does the Tigard Police have in regarding to hiring wandering officers Those are law enforcement officers who are fired from one agency only to be rehired by another. And what percentage of Tigard officers have been previously fired from another agency? And so I can tell you, and I'll only answer to how the Tigard Police Department does their backgrounds. We do our due diligence. And I would be very apprehensive to hire anybody who was fired from another agency, if they were even to get that far in our process. But through the background, we would have to know what it was that they were fired for, go through the details, get it from that other agency, and make a determination as to why I felt that they were still worthy of being hired. I have not done that. Under my 3.5 years, I have not hired, so 0 is our percentage of somebody who's previously fired from another agency. Okay, what will Tigard Police do if residents are not wearing masks in indoor spaces? As you all know, the governor made her announcement that comes in effect today about mandating that people wear their mask indoor in public spaces. We are not the enforcing entity. We're kind of the last resort. Obviously, and the governor, I think, has stated this many times, that she is just hoping that people voluntarily comply, that they understand the value of this, and they understand the need to probably decrease the number of cases. And in Washington County, we've seen it kind of skyrocket right now. And so there is, Washington County does have an enforcement entity under the public health. So if businesses are not complying, they have a procedure. We've asked to be notified, so if there was a business in Tigard that wasn't complying, we would certainly want to know about it, but they have their protocols in place. And like I said, we're probably the last resort as far as any enforcement. And in full accountability and transparency, I want to add on to that. As police department, police officers, we are here to lead the way. And yes, there are times where our officers have not worn a mask, and I've heard about it. And why at an accident did an officer not wear their mask? I ask all officers to do so. They're not wearing them in their car, so if they exit their car quickly and they don't take the time to put on that mask, that's a possibility. That's not an excuse, that's just a possibility. I have reiterated, they know, they understand the importance not only by leading the way of demonstrating what the governor has asked, but also to ensure that we protect our officers, but also we protect the community who we come in contact with. So I do know that we are not 100%, and we'll keep working on that. Another question that comes is, does the Tigard Police Department use body cameras? So for the last 15 years, the Tigard Police Department has used in-car video. And so what those cameras will do is take pictures of anything that's happening outside of the patrol car, but also equally as important, if we are transporting somebody in a car, the cameras can be then turned inside, and that protects anybody we're transporting to the jail, to the hospital, minors, if we're having to take them to home, victims. It's just a nice protection. So for many years we have done dash cameras. They are coming to end of life, and so we're at a decision: do we upgrade the dash cameras, also add body cameras, or replace it and do body cameras, because all of it is quite expensive, as you can imagine, along with all the data storage. We currently have 7 body cameras deployed in all of our traffic officers, our canine handlers, and our school resource officers. So our officers are accustomed to having some sort of video tool with them most of the time. But we are talking to the council. It wasn't budgeted in this upcoming, so we're going to look at what the cost might be and moving forward. But I would venture to say that we'll be going down the path of body cameras, but that won't be completely new to our officers. And like I said, for the last 15 years, we've used dash cameras. Okay, the next question is, now that the levy has passed, what steps are we taking within the department to make progress towards hiring and training? We're full hiring mode, excuse me. We have just had 2 oral board sessions. One was just yesterday, and then a couple weeks ago. We have several in background. We did have a list that we were created, but due to the pandemic and our ability to actually make contact with individuals, we were limited, and of course we weren't going to cut corners. So until we could actually make contact with maybe an employer, or if they were a lateral coming from a different department, if we couldn't go to that department and look at their personnel records, then they were going to be in a pause. And so we're in full board trying to get people hired. We're also looking to hire people that represent the Tigard community, that reflect the Tigard community, and really have our core values. If you heard me speak at all, you know that my philosophy is a guardian mentality. And so what I'm looking for are those people who have exceptional communication skills, empathy, compassion, and we can teach the tactical part, but it's really hard to teach somebody who, to be an effective communicator. So we're really looking at those that embody all of our core values. So we are making progress. The police academy was on hold for a period of time. We had 3 officers that had to come back. Next week they get to go back to the academy, and they have the majority of their academy time still left to go. I think they have 14 weeks to go, and then there's a stack up waiting for us to send more officers when we hire them to get them into the academy. So the COVID-19 has really impacted our ability to get people trained as well. But what we intend to do is do quarterly updates. I'll present once a month to the council, all on our executive dashboard, which is our calls for service, the crime, all of that. I have a section in there that will talk about levy, how we're doing, because the first part reporting out is going to be on our hiring abilities, but the other part is also how we're doing with getting our advanced crisis intervention de-escalation. Once again, the training rooms open up again. Another question from Rachel. Thank you, Rachel, for your understanding. I have no issues with officers not wearing a mask when they need to exit their vehicles quickly to help us. If my family needed help, an officer was slowed down just to put on a mask. I appreciate that, and giving that level of grace is important. We have been telling the officers, because that's about the only place they can have a safe breathing spot is when they're in their car, because we're all in single cars. Nobody's usually paired up unless they're a training car. And so that's about the only time they can take that mask off. And then when they get out in the public, again, if you can keep the 6-foot distancing, some officers prefer that because, again, they feel like you can see my face, you can see my tone, you can see my conversations, and when necessary, commands. But again, it's all about health and safety of everybody, so we'll do better. But thank you for your grace and leniency on that. Monty, thank you. Thank you for all that you do for your community. And Veronica, thanks for touching base. I have to say, and I really want to shout out, but not diminish, the important conversations that we're having on police reform, especially in our communities of color. But also, what I'm heartened about is we've had many Tigard residents drop off cards, drop off, cookies or some sort of recognition of saying thank you. We're probably in the hundreds of just cards, or kids writing, homemade cards, just saying thank you for what you do. And I have to tell you, the officers appreciate that. That's who gets to see those. They're put in our roll call room, and they get to see every kind word, support, and they need that because they're being evaluated on things that happen clear across the country. And why they may personally say, I would never do something like what I just saw in that video. We know that we're kind of being painted with the same brush. And so the fact that people have taken the time to say thank you to us is not lost on us. So thank you for that. Veronica, hello, and thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. So Mitchell wants to know, the photo enforcement cameras go off for no reason in the hours of 3 to 4 in the morning. I've seen multiple times in 72nd go off at least 3 blocks away with no traffic. Mitchell, you're not the only person, and I have talked to several other frustrated drivers, and I realize if I say, don't worry, if you don't see it come in the mail, it wasn't on you. And I know that doesn't sound satisfied if you're thinking, well, they just flashed, nobody else is around, it's only me. Why should I have to wait to see if I get anything in the mail? So I realize that will only go so far. The cameras are based on algorithms. So at 3 and 4 in the morning, if you're going a certain speed, and the cameras anticipate that if you continue on that speed, you're going to trip up that light. So it's preparing itself. Now you could obviously come to a stop, but the cameras already has an algorithm. It just means that the cameras go off. There is 3 reviews before you would even consider it a violation. And so the vendor looks at anything first, and those would not even be. They'd see you stop and we wouldn't get them. But then a police officer then has to review any true violations to say, yes, we think it's a violation, and then they would issue the citation. And so we're still working with the vendor. We've heard it in Hall Boulevard. We've had many frustrated people. And so please bear with us. This is new to us. Even though the vendors have been doing this for a long time, we're still just trying to understand why things trip up and the algorithms. But to my knowledge, the people who have brought in concerns have not received a violation that would say this is that they don't trust or have confidence in the system. So, but keep it going if that happens. But again, we're making adjustments and working with the vendor to be accountable for those triggers. Lorraine asks, has a decision been made regarding SROs or school resource officers continuing at schools in the fall? Very important question. We are in discussion right now, or collaboration or partnership with the school district. We provide school resource officers at their request. And so if they want us, we'll be there, absolutely. But what Dr. Sue has prided herself on is listening to her stakeholders, her community, especially communities of colors and students of that. Do they have concerns? Should the program look a little different? And we've also heard from many others that value the school resource officers program. So we are in joint conversations, the city managers there, myself, Tualatin city manager and police chief are there, and then of course all of the diversity equity coordinators, Dr. Sue herself, and we've hired a facilitator who will help the conversations and see where we land. We both have a vested interest in making a decision by August, because we want to make sure that we get our usual annual school resource officer training done in August, and so we hope to have a decision. But I know the school is going to welcome all of you for your comments, whether it'll be some sort of virtual platform or also the ability to email, write. So look for more information, but no decision has been made. And what I'm pleased about is it's just not a knee-jerk reaction by things that are happening again across the country or in bigger cities where they're just ending these programs. Tigard has a long-standing reputation for school resource officers, and in fact, the voters approved to add one officer. Where we've had to cut it in the past because of budget constraints. And so I really just want to see us being evaluated by the service we provide. And I'm pleased to say that the school district is doing their due diligence. So look for something more coming up in the next month. Oh, who is Dr. Sue? I'm sorry. Dr. Sue is what she goes by. It's Dr. Sue Reiki Smith is the school superintendent. So sorry about that. So Carrie wants to know, I love your comment about empathy and communication comes first in hiring. It is true. To effectively communicate, let alone to communicate under stress, is so important. And so when we look for those, I look for people who've had customer service type jobs. And I ask them, tell me about a time when you've had to basically deal with a difficult customer, and how do you for lack of a better term, we use de-escalation, but how do you, deal with it under pressure? How do you maybe talk somebody down? And so we really delve into those types of questions. The other thing that I'm doing when it gets to the chief's interview, so they've passed their background, is we're having very honest conversations, and I lead with, have you seen the video of George Floyd? Are you following what is happening? Because I used to say that, you're a reflection of me and the Tiger community, but now we can see that you're a reflection of this entire country. And so when you wear that uniform and you do something like what we saw, it has catastrophic impacts to everybody, our profession, the communities of color, everybody, I think has been just in shock. And so we have those conversations. I talk to the officers, we walk through that, and they get a real life perspective of how important their actions are on a day-to-day basis. And I appreciate, thank you for bringing the questions in, and keep them coming. So Shannon wants to know, keep up the great work, Tigard PD. We love you. Thank you, Shannon. Again, appreciate the support, and we'll hopefully keep leading in the front. And we always want to evaluate ourselves. I know we aren't perfect. I hear those comments too, where we could do it better, and we take that to heart, and we look at those and try and make adjustments. But the support is very important. So Alexander asks, what is the speed that a ticket is generated? Well, that's a tricky question. So by the state statute, you can't set it any lower than 11 miles per hour. But what we didn't want to get people lulled into is technically, anything over 1 mile over a speed limit could, an officer could stop. Now, does that happen? No, probably not. I would hope not, almost. But it is 11 miles per hour for what the standards are for photo speed enforcement in those intersections. But I don't want to encourage 11 miles per hour over. But that's where the threshold is. Next question is, what are the crime trends in the city right now? So again, we're still in what we consider our COVID-19 pandemic. I know more and more, I think we're gauging that by our traffic, that we're seeing more and more people going back to work and the commuters. But some of the things that we're seeing right now, we do see a little bit of trend in our property crimes, some burglaries. One that is just, I'll be presenting to the council next week, is we're seeing some assaults. And simple assaults, so not aggravated, no bones broken, no huge injuries, but when you peel that back, probably what we're seeing a lot of is, again, under our mental illness that are resulting in actual physical assaults with other people. We're about, at the end of this month, we go about 60 to 66% societal crimes, and a lot of that is where our mental illness, homelessness, those types of issues come. And I think in June we'll be at about almost 70% in those categories. So again, when you're talking about hospitals being closed and businesses, I think some of our vulnerable people that may need their medication or not getting treated, we're seeing more and more people acting, I don't know if it's acting out or exhibiting concerning behavior, and then we get called to that. So that's kind of the trends that we're seeing right now. Matt, and teachers, not sure I understand your comment, Matt. So I'll have to just clarify that, Matt, if you can send it back in a little bit about what you're thinking of the school resource officers. So I'll wait to see if you can clarify that a little bit more. Stephen is asking, how much training do your officers go through? Anything close to the Washington County Sheriff's Office? Well, one of the things that was enlightening is the DPSST, the Basic Police Academy, did some virtual seminars or listening, and I got a chance to send our elected officials to listen to that, as well as our community leaders. And so first of all, they talk about the 16 weeks and all the different categories and the breakdown of the training that they get. We are only mandated 24 hours out of that year on certain areas like firearms, ethics, things of that nature. And so, 24 hours is what we're mandated to report to keep their certification. Now, we do a lot more than that. But one of the things that was, in my opinion, when I got here, sorely short on is that advanced crisis intervention and de-escalation. That's the model that I've seen is the 40 hours. And just for us to unplug an officer for 40 hours is very difficult when you're always operating on minimum staffing. And so that's why I presented it in the levy, because I figured that was the only way we could actually get more officers that training sooner, which right now we were averaging, I think, 7 officers in 5 years. But you think about it, we use de-escalation skills every single day. And so we've got that. Thank you again for passing the levy and allowing us to do that. And so now we're looking at, once the training opens up, is to get that 40-hour training. And that's at a level that your mental health teams, like Washington County's mental health team, they take that certification. So isn't it nice that we would have more officers that really are at that certified level to be able to really look at cues and tone when they're talking to somebody who's in crisis, a little bit even more than our officers have, which receive about 8+ hours dedicated to crisis intervention. Let's see, how long before you're hired all the officers for the levy, and how many? So in the levy, that covered 9. 8 officers in patrol and 1 school resource officer. And then there were 2 non-sworn for our records and property and evidence. So how long will it take? As long as it takes, without basically shorting our standards and shorting our backgrounds. We are actually adding more background investigators. We've just went through a process so that, again, we can hopefully onboard people a lot faster, but not at the sacrifice of quality to get those folks. And then once we even give a conditional offer, so I like somebody, I want to hire them. The nice thing is we have a check and balance. So they still have to go through a doctor, they still have to go through a psychologist, and I may think they're fine, but they delve into a lot deeper things and tell me that they're not a pass. And then I basically have to start over again with the next person in line. And that does happen. So my goal is to get them within at least hired and identified in this first year. Getting into the academy is going to be another challenge. Again, we're hoping to balance some laterals, because there are a few laterals, and again, they're not trying to run away from their past or what they've done. The people that we're talking to have a reason to either come back home to Oregon, or maybe they have an elderly parent that needs their attention, and so they're willing to leave their home state where they're doing their police work and come here so that they can be closer. Those are the people that we're looking at in onboarding, and then they would not have to go through the academy, and so again, they can get on the streets a whole lot faster. So it would be nice to have a balance of laterals and entry level is what we're looking at. And the academy is maybe down September, November before we can get a few more new ones added. So again, we'll try and keep that update going on our website and in our monthly check-ins. What are laterals? Oh, another police term. I apologize. That's why I got a good group of people asking questions and when I get into jargon. So a lateral is somebody who's currently doing the job or has at least done the job in the last year. So again, if we had an officer come from Colorado who has family here, and so wanted to move his family here, and phenomenal officer came here, and then unfortunately had to go back to Colorado, and again, he has a stellar record, and so they welcomed him back. But when somebody comes from a different department, whether it's in-state or out-of-state, for the various reasons. You can imagine those are far more stringent because, again, we want to make sure that they're not running from something that hasn't surfaced yet. So they get scrutinized a whole lot more. But the advantages are they've been doing the job. They don't have to go to the academy. They just go through our training program. They may have to learn the Oregon state laws, but they're already usually well equipped. And so there are some advantages to hiring some lateral or experienced officers. So, okay, so all right, Matt, you're challenging me here. Tigard has some troubling history of teachers touching students. Seems to get swept away pretty well. I suggest additional SROs. I think I know what you're talking about, Matt. And the one, at least I know, since I've been here in 3 years, didn't end up getting swept away. I know it was probably delayed and ongoing, but I believe they were held accountable for those actions and actually charged criminally. If there's other information, boy, we sure like to hear about it offline and knowing about it. But you're right, if there are those things, having a school resource officer there, one of the things that I have noticed when I'm looking at the data on school resource officers and the level of trust, some of the calls that I've seen they get is students who are, in this age of technology, whether it's sexting, whether it's somebody videotaping our young kids exploring for the first time, and now all of a sudden it's on social media and they don't know what to do. And I've seen them come to a school resource officer to talk to them. And so I've definitely, when you build that trust, when you're in the schools every day, to have, somebody there that you can talk to and feel comfortable is extremely important. Okay, Chris wants to know if there are any 911 calls that you're currently sending unarmed civil servants to, what barriers are in the way of doing those. I think, Chris, if you're asking is we do have CSOs or community service officers, and they're civilian, they're non-sworn, and they handle mostly our abandoned vehicle complaints, a lot of our parking issues. So they have limited commission to do some of the parking issues. They'll help out with residential parking zones, around the Tigard High School. They'll take some cold calls like graffiti when there is no suspects. They'll help us out with that. So currently we have 2 CSOs, and in the performance audit completed by the Matrix Consulting, we had one that was unfilled. We filled that, and they said that's an adequate size and you want to at least keep those 2. So we do have 2 right now that do help us out and take those lower level. So that great question. Thank you. All right, Jeanette. Thank you. You're welcome. She's just thanking for taking the time to answer questions. Some fear light rail and bringing additional crime and homelessness to the Tigard community. I know that research doesn't support this. What role will the Tigard police officers have, if any, and how can we minimize the fears? Again, a great question. Yeah, when I first got here and the Southwest Corridor started, the conversations started coming up. And so I had to educate myself. And it was, I think the Orange Line in Milwaukee had only been up and running for 6 months to a year. So that was my go-to. I went to Milwaukee, talked to the police chief, the elected officials. We took a tour. I talked to the TriMet commander to see if there was any data that supported the perception of a crime train. The data didn't support it. However, they also had a plan that when a new line came in, they made sure that there were plenty of officers visible to discourage anybody from thinking that there were opportunities. We do have Tigard officers who work as a specialty assignment. They go out to work transit, and they can work over in this area, they can work downtown Portland, over in Gresham, and they get very comfortable with understanding the TriMet system in transit. It gives them valuable experience because we know that we have obviously TriMet out here, and so then we're better equipped to handle the issues And so we're going to see what happens, but obviously I think the fact is we'll have a plan in place should that happen. But a lot of it is up in the air as far as what the community wants, as far as even visibility of policing in those areas. It may come back to, not armed, maybe security only. So we have to also see where the future's going under the police reform when it comes to transit. Hola, Betsy. Nice to see you. I hope all is well in Tualatin. She's given us a shout out and asking how many bilingual officers does Tigard have. Obviously, I don't speak Spanish, so that was the extent of my greetings and salutations. We have actually, I think, 4 officers now that speak Spanish, and then we have other officers that speak other languages. One of our most recent officers, and hopefully we're going to share with you who we onboard and a little bit about themselves. But for example, one of our new officers who's going to the academy, who speaks fluent Spanish, did a lot of, was a tour guide in Ecuador, and really went abroad and had some great stories, and was happy to get him on board. And not only the value of being able to speak 2 languages fluently, but just the culture, the things that he was able to experience. I'm hoping in a later Facebook we can highlight some of the people that we're onboarding, because I have to tell you, we're a private group, but there's some great stories I get to hear about them, and hopefully we'll get to share that with you. So Betsy, we're working on that. We know that that's important, especially in the Latinx community. We want, that's our most rapidly growing, and so to be fluent in Spanish is critical, and that is not lost on me. So Rob, is there any requirements for officers to live in Tigard to work in Tigard? No, there is not. And that is pretty much true along law enforcement. Under community policing, that was really a desirable thing to have, and some agencies had pay incentives to do that. Others made it just a requirement, and then again you found that your pool was shrinking on qualified applicants, and so no, there is no requirement. Although we do have a few officers that do live in Tigard, and then some, as you can all imagine, say it's the cost of living here is higher, and so they can't afford to live in Tigard. So I think they're just like everybody else, and as far as where they can and where they choose to live in their off time. And yeah, if having been 34 years and 30 of it in Tacoma, I used to live in Tacoma. What I found, especially when I was a narcotics officer, I would run into people on my off-duty time at the mall, and they'd point me out, and and then when I started having kids, and they knew where I lived. So there is still a part of us where we really want to be off when we're off, and just kind of take that cloak off and be ourselves and not under scrutiny. So I do know that there are people who probably like to live that way as well. So Kimberly, again, a nice shout out. Thank you. I appreciate it for the support of the Tigard Police Department. Okay, another question. Are we offering more services now that we're in phase 1 for COVID? Not a lot of change. One of the things that we are doing is, if you're not aware, we do have the ability to take online reports now. That is something we've been trying to get to even before the pandemic, but even more so, when we're kind of limited as to whether you want an officer. So you can file for certain crimes, it's usually with no suspect, maybe it's a a low-level situation, and they're on our website what the criteria is. But at the leisure of your home or on your phone, you could file that report so that you can get a number, and then if it is something like your car was broken into and items taken, that you could then get a number and file it with your insurance claim. And sometimes, people were waiting an hour to, I heard the worst case scenario, 4 hours. And so we really wanted to give people the option. If you wanted to talk to an officer, maybe get some tips, we were still going to provide that. But if you did not want to be held up or wait for an officer who's maybe handling a higher priority call, you could at least file that report and maybe contact us a later day if you wanted to talk to an officer. So we're happy to provide that. We have some kiosks that once our lobby is open, you'll be able to do a number of things. You can file a police report. You could look at your video if you received a photo enforcement ticket. You can pay some of your other bills. And so that kiosk, right now our lobby is not open to the public. It's more controlled under phase 1. But should we hit phase 2, we'll be opening up that more. We're still not allowing people to come into the building. Again, the city hall itself just started getting employees back. And so under phase 1, we're still in that very much trying to isolate as much as possible. For the officers, we try to do business as usual, not as much of asking everybody to step out, but if we can still ask people, is anybody sick? Can you come and talk to us if the weather's okay, or you're ambulatory? Can you come out and talk to us in that way? We're still trying to do that. We're fully engaged in traffic stops now, discretionary, but are able to do that, and some of our other business as usual. And I think you should see that the website for online reporting is added into this chat, so hopefully you get that information. Oh, here's a question I always dread come 4th of July. How is Tigard Police addressing fireworks this year? Probably not how you would want to hear. It is illegal to fire off fireworks. We know that. Every year, the city participates in a big event so that hopefully people would go to Cook Park or the high school and enjoy those festivities. Every year, especially around midnight, maybe a little bit before then, all the neighbors implode and fireworks are going off. Unfortunately, that's also about the time where we're dealing with domestics and drunk drivers and everything else, so it's a lower priority. So I'm here to acknowledge that every year I know that we disappoint some of our community who are entirely frustrated with people violating the laws and firing off fireworks. I can only imagine that with the cancellation of this event, people may choose to want to entertain it in their neighborhoods. This year, what we are going to do is, because we're not having officers work the event at Cook Park, we are going to do firework enforcement patrol. 2 officers dedicated to go out and make contact with those who are firing off illegal fireworks. So there are some, that are legal. Your sparklers are low, but we're talking about the M80s. We're talking about the ones that we are concerned about our houses catching on fire, the ones that our poor animals are stressed out about. And please remember our veterans who have PTSD. And while you're enjoying the festivities, it is traumatic for a lot of our folks. So again, we're going to go out and try and make some contact. This will be new this year because, again, I have some of the resources to be able to do it this year. But I'm also realistic that if we're dealing with a neighborhood over here, you may have 5 other neighborhoods going off at the same time. So I'm already going to say I'm sorry if I don't meet your expectations, but we are just not letting it go along the wayside either. So Whitney, again, thank you. Appreciate it. And again, I too want to say thank you again for all of the engagement, keeping the questions going. We have about 13 minutes, I think. So I want to make sure that I've gotten to the questions that you guys have been asking about. Let's see. If you've heard me explain a little bit more about advanced crisis intervention de-escalation, what I referred to, what I've learned, is the model that we're trying to get to is called the Memphis model. And So I'm asked to explain a little bit more. First of all, if you're in that area of mental illness and the psychology, I would say go to Google Memphis Model. The University of Memphis is one that created it. And really what it is again, it's designed for the advanced training of officers, those who might be dedicated to go into a hot situation and possibly de-escalate it, or crisis intervention. Washington County mental health officers that are trained do the Memphis Model. It's right now it's 40 hours, and it covers a whole lot of topics, from schizophrenia to substance abuse to veterans, PTSD. It's how you talk with the tone, what words might trigger somebody. And so it really gets far more in depth. I am told it is one of the only ones that is actually you can get certified in. And one of the requirements is that you do role playing. They also bring in our clinicians. So it's not just an officer teaching an officer, but you get the mental health professionals in there. You get people who are living with mental health and getting their perspective. So you can imagine if we can get every sworn officer in that type of training, how wonderful that'll be. But I aspire to get everybody in the Memphis Model. What we're challenged with again is the frequency of what these trainers can do, the volume that they can do at a time. And so we're also going to do 8-hour trainings and keep it going throughout the life of this levy as well. I think it's important work. But Memphis Model, if you're interested, feel free to look that up in greater detail. Stacy, yes, we want to keep our SROs as well. And so look forward to announcements from the school district or to the police department when we identify dates where we can ask for input. And then if you have some thoughts, please share them at that time with the forum. We appreciate it. Marianne is thanking me for these discussions. You're very welcome. In the previous discussions, you asked what data we used in Tigard to determine SROs do more good than harm in our schools. And you're still requesting access to that information. You would also like to know where we are in the process of bringing the SRO issue to the table and establish a committee. So if you didn't catch it in the beginning, Marianne, it's really is the school district driving this process, because it's a service we provide, even though they pay a small portion of one of the officers and we do the rest. And of course, we're ready to add another one through the levy dollars. They've got to want us. And so we're really joining in with the school district on what process they want. And they want to be very inclusive with their students, especially their students of color, family members. They want to, trauma informed, because what our students of color may be seeing out with police interaction. They're concerned about what they feel the environment with our SROs in the school. The concern is what does the data in Tigard say for prison to pipeline, so the school to prison pipeline. So we've just pulled the data, and right now what we're doing is a deeper dive. So in other words, not just numbers, but actually how does an SRO get contacted. And so we are presenting that data in those presentations to the school. So look for that, but we're still in not just the numbers, but the comments behind the numbers. To give an example is how does an officer get contacted? I think I talked about it earlier in this chat, is if a student is subject of sexting or an embarrassing video, more than a couple times they've actually gone into the SRO's office and sought advice, asked it to stop, and it's a crime, and the school resource officer will investigate that. So those are very sensitive issues that because of the relationships, the student has felt they could go to that officer. And so will I be able to anecdotally, we'll have stories to say, do they do more harm than good? You could look at the petition that was done just before the pandemic and the schools closed, when the high school SRO, Brian Imus, was about to term out, and many of the students signed a petition asking me to keep him extended because they trusted him, they wanted him there, and that, to me, that speaks volumes over numbers. And so we'll have some data, but we'll have some stories. But again, we want to hear what the students feel, what the parents want, and so it's about us listening and seeing. Also, if it continues, can we do it a little bit different too? So it's not a, if they keep it, will it look the same? It may not look the same. We may get some great information and change some things that might need changing. So stay open to the dialogue. Let's see. So Rob is asking, despite the research that shows that red light cameras only change the type of accidents, not the amount of them, and research that shows it actually increases accidents, why did the city of Tigard install these, and did residents get any say? Sorry about that, Rob. Their photo enforcement programs have been around for 20 plus years, and Tigard, I guess, started looking at this about 10 years ago, and it's really generated by either the community or the elected officials. About a year prior to me coming on in April of 2017, the dialogue was restarted with the elected officials. And when I got here, it was already determined that we would go with the photo enforcement program. It was just who was the vendor, where should we have it, and we really used our crash data to say where we need to put those cameras in. So there is data. It has to come from the community to support it. They had many forums because it took probably a year process to 6 months. And people were allowed to come to any council members, add some input. So there was some say in this, and a lot of people highly supported it and actually asked, hey, can we get it on Bull Mountain, or we have problems at Canterbury. And so there are others that were looking for having these photo enforcement in other parts of the city. Yes, I have seen where the crash data actually might go up a little bit in the beginning, because if you're so used to having a car in front of you run a yellow light, and so you are anticipating them running that light, and so you're giving yourself more or less cushion because you think they're going to be gone, and all of a sudden they just recognize, oh, this is a photo red light intersection, and they slam on their brakes. You can see some minor rear ends in the first 30 days, 60 days, but even that, we weren't seeing that here because all around us there's photo enforcement, and I think our drivers, once they knew where they were at, kind of quickly adapted to that, and we're not seeing the increases, but we're still fairly new into that, and as I said today, the speed through intersection is just started, and that was the other part. It was a two-part of this total photo enforcement program that was asked of us to install. We did it in two parts. One is the photo red light, because we didn't know what the bandwidth would be, and then we knew we were going to add speed through intersections, and with COVID, traffic volumes went down, but we still want to stay true to what we said, which was we were going to give about 6 months apart before we implemented the speed through intersections. And the speed through intersections, again, are at Hall in 99 and at 72nd in 99. And again, somebody asked early on, what's the speed threshold? And it'll trigger at 11 miles per hour, and that is set by state statute. And then again, just remind everybody, the photo red light portion is at both of those intersections, Hall, 72nd, but also Durham. We were not approved for speed on Durham, so it's just in those two intersections. And I also report out monthly to the council on what those numbers look like. What are the violations numbers looking like? So And I've heard from people say, well, can we get access to that dashboard that you report out monthly? And yes, we are going to put it on our website. So we want to make sure that if you don't want to tune in or can't tune in to my monthly presentation, that you'll have access to the information that I'm presenting to council. And I know that we've got about 3 minutes. For Stacy, will it be posted on Tigard PD Facebook page after this? Yes, that is the answer. So if I could just take just the last couple minutes to go again about police reforms, and again, what has been my approach? A lot of listening, and a lot of conversations on how we do things in Tigard PD. What are the things that I've implemented since I've come here on accountability and transparency? On our website, and what I reported out, if you're familiar with the 8 Can't Wait campaign, I reported out that we hit 7 of the 8, and why I thought it was important that we actually didn't hit the 8th one, which is a force continuum, and that I think our threshold is much better and stronger. So we're doing that. I've actually had not only these great virtual chats, which I think are extremely important, but I've actually had people come and reach out to me personally, and that is, especially our communities of color, and people telling very personal stories of maybe not their experience in Tigard, but just the impacts they've had growing up, being a person of color, and the trust or concerns with the police department. And those are pretty impactful and powerful for myself, but also to hear their perspective, and the fact that the people that are reaching out just want to make it better, and not just looking to point fingers or blame, but I've had actually people come and say, how can I play a role in this and make it better? So, Alicia, yes, I can say Black Lives Matter. I've said it in others. I apologize if I didn't lead with that, because it does. Black lives does matter. And this is an important issue, and one that, I don't see going away, nor should it. I think we've seen ebb and flows, and I think this has really got everybody's attention. And even the city of Tigard, you've heard the mayor, you've heard the elected officials, our city leader, Marty Wine, saying we want to be an anti-racist government entity. And I'm part of the leadership team, and we're looking at what does that mean, systematic racism in our processes. And not being offended to say, are you calling me a racist? No, but we can say, what is our processes? Do we have barriers that are negatively impacting our communities of color? And if they are, what can we do to eliminate them? And you have to be conscious, you have to be awake, you have to be aware of what those are and ask those tough questions. We're doing a lot of work. We're looking at what equity lens should we use to evaluate those. But because the police department is such in the spotlight, we've got to move a little bit faster. We're smaller than the entire city, and it's so important, the role that we in the outreach to the community, that we're looking at that now and seeing what changes we can make. And again, on our website, but there was a special legislative session. There were 6 accountability measures that were on there. And if you're interested in that, those will be posted, but make yourself aware of those. It deals with tear gas, arbitration accountability, chokeholds, several other measures, problem employees, things of that nature. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but some past. There'll be work groups on use of force, so a lot is happening. So this will not be the last time we have a chat. And again, some of you have emailed me directly. I've tried to be pretty responsive to everybody that's asked the question, and I will continue to do that. One of the more common themes that we try and put those out so you can see those questions that have been asked and answered. So again, so you don't have to keep repeating it, or if somebody's already asked it. So those common themes and threads we also post. So I guess it's time for me to close. I'm a little bit over. So again, thank you so much. Keep the questions coming. Thank you for the support. Thank you for holding us accountable. And we are better. So I look forward to the next chat. Take care.